Everyone, my name is Josh Devon. I'm currently the co-founder and CEO of a company called Sundera. We're a startup, started about a year ago. We're focused on creating these deterministic lanes for the agents. We are working with a lot of companies right now that are deploying coding agents in particular, especially with like teams that are outside of developers. So we're seeing a lot of like Anthropic co-work and others getting turned on. People are starting to have incidents, and so we create like the behavioral controls that prevent those incidents from happening. If prior to this company, I co-founded another company called Flashpoint, which does threat intelligence, signed to the Global 2000, Fortune 500, etc. Did that for about a decade, and then before that, my early career was in counterterrorism. So really focused on what you would call today threat intelligence, so tracking bad guys on the internet. Today I live in West Philly. And thanks for letting me introduce myself. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Visoki. I'm the CEO and founder of Stony Hill Advisors. We are a lower middle market advisory firm. And I started the business 16 years ago when I realized that I was reaching retirement myself. And I looked at the business community and saw there are many thousands and thousands of business owners in my age group that need to sell and retire. So I saw a need and I started the business, and we've been still on that wave. It's sometimes called the silver tsunami, but it's an age wave of people leaving. And the interesting thing is, I like to remind people, if they don't sell their business and they close it, their employees are not going to have a job because they're usually around the same age. So it's a critical stage in the U.S. economy to keep these people employed and keep those businesses alive.
Hi, I'm Fred Wilf. I have a small law firm called Wilf Tech. I'm a lawyer over 30 years now. 16 of those years were in large law firms, best known as Saul Ewing and Morgan Lewis. I joke that back in college I was a computer programmer for about 5 minutes. But I've been working with technology companies across industries ever since I got out of law school for over 30 years now. I work with companies of all sizes, from startups, we're outside general counsel, for small, medium-sized enterprises, where technology, intellectual property counsel, and then for large companies, including Fortune 500, global enterprises, we are often fractional counsel. We come in and we're another set of hands that help the in-house law department. A lot of it is technology transactions. It's also compliance, soon-to-on privacy, and not surprisingly, a lot of AI.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think getting started off, and it's it'll be a bit of a little probably bounce around a little bit with the diverse group here. So when it comes to valuations, it's aside from revenue, what are the top things we're looking at now that help drive valuation and multipliers? How do you reduce that risk so that the buyers feel good about what they're looking at? And we'll start with Paul.
Sure. The primary determinant for value is the profitability of the business, because nobody wants to buy a business and not make money. So it's a return on investment calculation. But what plays a big part is, what are the risks that you're assuming that you're going to continue that revenue? You're buying a business based on history, and you're hoping the future is going to continue that same path of continued profit. So one of the important parts of this session is cybersecurity is a certain risk component that people will analyze during due diligence before they make an offer to buy a company. And then staying current with various AI tools is equally important to improve the value of what someone's buying. Two businesses in the same industry, and one is more advanced in using newer technologies and getting an economy of scale, you're going to get a better offer.
Right. And how about, so when we look at things that matter for valuation, what are things that owners often think matter, but really don't?
Well, sometimes they think revenue's important, which is somewhat important in one case. It's for subscription businesses where the revenue is predictable for many years in the future. You control the cost. You can sell that revenue to somebody else. So that it has a value component based on revenue. But in the other case, it's really based on the net profitability and how well you run the business and how you keep your books clean. And what also plays a part is the risk factors of the industry you're in, and how big your company is. A bigger business has less risk because what you don't want to have happen, if you buy a business and it fails. So if it's a multi-million-dollar business, we serve market from 2 to 50 million in revenue. So if you're 30, 40 million in revenue, you're much safer acquisition than if you're a $2 million company.
So moving, kind of pivoting over to tech a little bit for Josh. So what are some of the differentiators you're seeing, like with AI, in cyber? How are they creating enterprise value when someone goes to the deal table? How do you display that as something that should be a multiplier?
Yeah, I guess I see that there's kind of like two types of companies out there. I think there's like two sets of expectations. One is like, where I am in VC land, it's like expected that you're going to be like an AI native, company, right? And I think what that means is like, they're looking for people who clearly are deep in AI, and everything has to be AI, right? Like any investment right now, at least in VC land, it has to be AI. So, something you have to do has to mention AI. I think for like brownfield or different businesses, I think it depends. I'm seeing like some are, when it comes to valuations, I feel like some are risk, intolerant. And so they're, I have to preserve my valuation rather than like try to grow my valuation. So I think it depends on, sort of, Paul, what you're saying, just like what size you are. And I notice also even like culturally, like the American banks are going to lean way further ahead than the UK banks, than the Canadian banks. And, they've all kind of got like their structures in place that allow them to take the, I just call that out as like, I see, there's differences and different folks are leaning out, but a lot of others are sort of holding back when it comes to using AI as a value driver. I think we see in the larger enterprises, folks who are masking AI, with layoffs. I don't think anyone really thinks that the block layoff had anything really to do with AI. But if you're a CEO and you're getting the response from the market that every time you fire people, your stock price goes up, right, you're kind of incentivized to do that. And you look much more like an AI visionary. So I think and then I think when it comes to the smaller companies, yeah, there's just an expectation that you're using these tools. I don't we talked about a little bit in the last talk, about intellectual property.
Right.
I think the feeling among VCs is there's no such thing as intellectual property anymore. The only thing that matters is speed, right? In a world where I can point cloud code to any website and be reverse engineer and build this website for me. There's no moat, right? And so the only moat is compute, right? So, and that's taken care of. And then, everything else is can I build this stuff faster and release features and ship faster? So speed. So if you're not using coding agents, at least at a bare minimum, I mean, you're not going to be able to compete at all at a very, again, a high risk tolerant.
So we see when we see the CEOs and the executive teams, especially in the larger organizations, they're now being held accountable to, you better have an AI strategy or you won't be here very long. And are they taking steps to make sure that they're being secure with implementations, or do you see that a little bit of job security and fear puts them off the rails?
We were just talking about this. I feel there's I've said this to some people and maybe I've talked to here, but there's been a shift in palpably over the past 6 months or so. When the coding agents hit an inflection point in December with their quality of the Opus 4.5 models, the utility of the coding agents became so great that no one could ignore. These newfangled cars, everyone's these things clearly are better than the horses and buggies, right? And so that plus OpenClaw gave a lot of the non-technical C-suite the vocabulary to be I need OpenClaw, I want this. I have CISOs now telling me the HR team says that they want to write code. I know of large enterprises that are just buying Claude code licenses for all the teams. Anthropic's making the money somewhere, right? They're selling massive amounts of licenses to large enterprises who are throw Claude code at everyone from the finance team. So some are, doing that and don't, I think, fully appreciate what the risks are, because the risks with agents are, there, we've talked about, like, there are some famous ones that go viral on like Twitter and stuff, but there hasn't been like, my earlier career was in threat intelligence. We did a lot of early ransomware. And, for years we'd be like, oh, ransomware is a big problem. Like, we really need to solve ransomware. It wasn't until Colonial Pipeline, when, got ransomware and the price of gas went up, that people were like, oh, we really need to do something about ransomware. It's like, yeah. So I think, like, it's only a matter of time before that happens. But, Pat Opit, who is the CISO of JPMC, said this at RSA. He's like, look, we all, as institutions, have to decide on that utility security trade-offs. Like, we're all making this decision that the utility of this, technology outweighs the risk. But there are a lot of people who are kind of like sticking their head in the sand and sort of being like, no, there's not, we got it. But he's like, no, we just have to go and, like, there's a lot to do to actually secure these things. And so that's kind of what I'm seeing at, like,
and we see buyers really dislike risk, right? We're always trying to minimize risk. And this is one of them, I'll call it rare instances in business where and we had a conversation earlier about was there are instances where we're seeing the risk is actually lower than the reward. So they're just taking the risks. And I don't think that's necessarily true for the SMB and smaller mid-market, but some of these fast-moving enterprises are acting very aggressive with how they're approaching this. And are you seeing that happening more and more?
I'm seeing, like, I think in SMBs, it's like, there's I guess I'm seeing two kinds. Like, one is like,
Unpack.
one is like, does this really matter for us? Like, we don't care about hyper growth, and, like, and that can be fine. And, like, yeah, you want, like, a do no harm, approach. And I think that makes sense to be cautious. On the other hand, you have others who are very worried that, like, the Global 2000 is going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And if they figure out agents, then, like, where am I? Like, once Amazon figures out agents, where am I left? And so I feel like in some ways there's pressure. I think also, again, like, just OpenClaw was like a sort of, 6-7 moment of, like, everyone's heard of OpenClaw, and everyone's like, oh, that's what an agent could do. Like, and so that's what we want. And we know it's possible. So people are knowing now what to start asking for. And I think you have non-technical people being like, hey, I can solve this thing with, I heard, like we were talking about earlier, but, like, yeah, I heard Claude can solve this for me. Can we use it?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
If I could add something to that too, in the SMB market especially, the owners are looking at how long they're going to be in that business before they're going to sell it. So is it worth investing now, or should I maybe let the whoever comes in, takes over, invest, because the technology is moving so fast anyway, let them take the issue. Now, they're going to pay a price because they're going to be viewed a little bit more risky, but it's a trade-off. They have to make that decision. Do I invest in the newest cyber AI kind of technology, or do I let it ride?
Right. So that they might lose, I'll call it a few multiples of EBITDA or something of that nature if they're not implementing newer things.
They may take,
because they need to be fixed up, and that's what might make them more attractive as well.
It could, but that's they don't know the future, what the offer is going to be, and it's also what's going to happen in the technology space. So a lot of people are sitting back.
The technology also allows the small, medium-sized enterprise to use some of the newer technologies to provide a little bit more protection at times in a more cost-effective way. So that helps as well for those who want to do that, for working with small companies and big companies, so to titrate that to the size of the company.
Yeah, the size of the company is important.
So, Fred, what are the legal risks that you see emerging with AI usage and?
We could be here all day. I do seminars with other attorneys and then go all day on that. But I'll give you a couple of them, including some that have already been mentioned. On the investment side, and Paul, I wish about this well, I think as well, Josh. One of the things with AI is that's changed some of the profile of how you value the company. Because what has happened is, and Dave was mentioning this in the last session, the Copyright Office has said that if you use AI to generate code, then that code is not going to be protected by copyright. You just feed a prompt into your favorite AI, and the code comes out, whether it's Claude Code or anybody else. That code is not going to be protected by copyright. If you handwrite code as in a more traditional manner, that code will be protected by copyright. Then you take that same code and feed that code that you wrote by hand into an AI, and you have a new version come out that's better, faster, cleaner, smarter. That what lawyers call derivative work, or a new version of the code, is protected only to the extent that includes the original handwritten code. Because the Copyright Office has said that as far as they're concerned, and based on prior law and precedent, copyright law will only protect human-created technology, human-created expression. And they consider AI technology not to be human-created. I disagree with some of that analysis, but this is not something that's going to change anytime in the short term,
Right.
and we'll probably just over the long term. That's on copyright side. On the patent side, the patent office has said, as long as the inventive concept is created by a human and not by an AI, then the patent will issue, even if an AI was used to help write the patent application. But it has to be human created. And we know this now because one gentleman was kind enough to write an AI, and then once he created his own AI, he had an AI develop some inventions and also do some copyright work, and he sued on both the copyright side and the patent side, and he did not get a copyright on his AI generated artwork or code. He did not get a patent on his AI generated invention. So that changes the profile when you go to look at a company. You can't protect AI generated code with a copyright, probably also not a patent, depending upon details, depending upon what the invention really is. So that makes it harder to protect it against third parties. Now, that also goes back to Josh's comment. In any new company, especially any new area, a lot of companies aren't worried about AI, aren't worried about IP. They weren't worried about patents, copyrights. They're probably spending more time on the branding, which is trademarks. And these days, we're also recommending that you look at trade secrets, which is keeping all this information confidential as best you can, because that gives you a suing body who uses it proper means to then trade secrets. Again, it changes the investment profile a bit going forward.
Have you seen that?
Invest.
Do you find organizations struggling to sell because now they don't have any patent, they don't have any copyright?
Yeah, in a couple of cases, especially for smaller companies who are looking to sell, they're not getting the numbers they're looking for, because they're and in one case, a client came to me and said, "Look, I want to sell this technology about it," and they've been working on it for about a year now, and it was mostly AI generated, not entirely, but mostly. And one potential buyer ultimately said, "I can have Claude Code build that for me. I don't need to buy it from you." So that also changed the value proposition, and changed, in that case, it reduced it essentially to zero for that potential buyer.
So on I'll lower the level of the commentary, but on a AI contract level. So should people be updating their employee handbook? Should they be updating their MSA and their NDAs? And what are you seeing in that? Because I'm imagining that has to be up to date.
It's been interesting. And I'm sure Ben was here earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here, but he's talking about, he's also a lawyer looking at some of these. Been seeing a flurry of contracts, one of which was interesting because it looked like somebody had dumped all of his nightmares to a single 18-page document. And it's like, maybe it's going to be a science fiction novel. I don't know. But it worked better as that, frankly, than as it did as a contract. But we are, my team and a lot of other lawyers are updating contracts and other legal documents. We want to make sure that we understand exactly how AI is being used for the business, how AI is being used to do business. And of course, as has been discussed throughout today, everybody in the company needs to understand how it's being used, what to do and not to do when it comes to using AI. Otherwise, as the old joke goes, it's a parasol that cuts both ways. and it can hurt people. It can get very hurt if the people who are using it are not properly trained in it, using it improperly. Biggest example right now in that context is somebody taking something that's confidential, putting it into a public model, and then not realizing that they've given up confidentiality and trade secrets and protection of the information they put into the public model. That's a loss of what could be essentially a major asset for the company.
And I know one of our panelists in the last group talked about the 100 employees. And I think that was meant in the terms of agent employees, not necessarily warm-bodied humans. And is there, I don't even know if I've seen any deals in the news about this, but how's the impact, I guess the speed to market with how these agents come out, and if you're able to reduce your costs or grow your organization without additional individuals, do you see a short-lived window for deals to be made? Because I'll imagine the EBITDA or net profit would grow substantially versus competition. Because if it's not protectable, it's going to be a little hard. But you're going to.
Yeah, and that's always a good point. But one thing we always that often see in a case where for some reason we can't protect the technology as well, and it goes back to Josh's point. You have to constantly reinvent the technology, constantly revise, redo, rebuild technology, just to stay ahead of everybody else. There's back in the day, there were a whole bunch of companies I was watching as they tried to protect their place in the market by suing everybody else.
Right.
And a couple of things happened. One is they won some suits, they lost some suits. Okay, the lawyers did well. That's good. I have no objection to lawyers doing well, but it didn't make sense to me because they were focusing on trying to litigate their way into profitability. It goes back to Paul's point, which is if you're not profitable, very little else counts. And some of these companies fell down not because they couldn't be profitable, but they were focusing on the wrong things to be profitable, including litigation, which is really more of a last choice, because litigation is not really designed to put everybody completely back to where they think they should be.
Yep.
And it's too expensive a process for that.
So if somebody wants to avoid some red flags of due diligence, what are some things that they should be doing today with, obviously, raise up your EBIT, right? That's for your net profit. But what are some things that you want to have in place, whether it's AI, cyber processes, or what are the things that somebody should be looking at immediately as an owner to go, I better have these things in order in my next 3 to 5 years if this is going to go right?
Well, due diligence is nothing but risk analysis. And it's the other party that's doing the risk and trying to figure out where they're going to assume a risk if they make an offer. So you have to think ahead of that. And so the self-analysis and in terms of AI and cyber, well, I think cyber is a little different. Cyber, it's a real risk. AI is I haven't invested yet, so let the next guy do that. So it's a little different equation. When you don't do due diligence, you really do have to think about how risky is my business from being destroyed if someone comes in. So it's a existential more than affecting the profitability.
Okay.
On the document side, also as part of due diligence, not surprisingly, do you have all the documents? Can you prove that you own what you claim to own? You have at least the rights to do what you're currently doing. My favorite war story is I got a call one day from a client who was buying a small business, and he wasn't he was not sure what he was seeing with the due diligence. It turned out it was a professor who had hired students to build some software for him, and that was the heart of the company. But there are no documents. Students had never signed up. And the professor apparently magically thought that because of that professor-student relationship, that the copy would transfer, and never bothered to ask a lawyer who would have told him it doesn't quite work that way. So in that case, you're really selling some software that he didn't know. Now the client ended up buying that small company anyway, and then he rewrote the software from scratch, and trying to find students who owed some money for doing that, to kind of make amends. But those are the kind of issues that do come up in due diligence, and it always makes sense. So you see this all the time, Paul, in your work. It makes sense to do your own due diligence before you go anywhere near selling your company. I've had a couple of companies that said to me, we're in startup mode. We hope to sell this company in 3 to 5 years. At that point, I'm saying every document that is critical here that you want to see in due diligence yourself, make sure you have that already in a folder someplace. And also understand that for the contracts, as an example, that any of the contracts that are critical to the company, you know what those rights are, and you also know whether that contract itself, if it's critical, can be transferred to the next client. That's part of it.
Yeah, I think if like as someone who's been through diligence many times through many rounds of funding, like once you've been through it once, then you kind of know what to expect. And so like at this point, it's pretty easy to just like grab everything. And I agree, like in terms of valuation, right? Like, having all of this stuff, all your contracts, it gives people confidence in the asset,
Exactly.
right? And it is like, a show of confidence. Like no one really knows where the bodies are buried. Like, you know what I mean? You sell your company, you're like, oh, they didn't get everything, but like, I think, the things that matter, having all your paper. And I think if you've never been through diligence before, and even if you have, like even this time around, like when I was going, it's just like, you pick your Gen AI, I'm at this, stage in revenue and I'm going to if I want to think about due diligence, like make my data room for me. Like, what do I need to put in my data room and how should I organize it? And then go through the checklist. And if you can't check, if you're like, oh, I don't, yeah, where is our DNO policy or whatever, all the stuff, then you could like over time, I think just get it there. And then you could probably point Claude at it or, and be like, now analyze this like a due diligence. What would you knock me off for in terms of valuation? And that's what I would do. So, if you haven't, and then, and then we'll I think it's going to be similar from customers as well. So the PEs right now are working with their own portfolio companies to get their hygiene in a good place because they want them adopting AI. What that means then is that they are learning what good looks like from their current portfolio, and when they acquire new assets, they will start having playbooks that will start asking questions that you may not have thought of, this ISO, what controls do you have around agent behavior? Tell us about your identity management. We talked a lot today in a lot of the sessions today about well, you got to have this and you got to have that and like all these rules and here are all the rules, but then it's just like, well, what that's why I go then with Office 365. It's like, I don't know how to do all these rules. Like, what are the controls? All I've got is CrowdStrike. Is CrowdStrike enough? How would I know? So I think it's like getting all of that understanding and I lost my train of thought.
No, there's a lot. Where I was going with it was there's so much we haven't seen in the due diligence portion yet because this is all so new. I was asking a question.
They're going to have frameworks that I would look at, to me, it's like, what are the banks going to start asking people for their vendors? Like, that's probably what happens, right? Like, so frameworks that people are starting to care about, like NIST AI RMF, more people are talking about ISO 42001. I think we're still people don't know what to ask. They're kind of like, it's kind of like a data thing, like where it's like, okay, is your data going somewhere I don't want it to? But it's not about like behavior, leakage of data, what controls you have. Look at AIUC-1. It's called it's the AI underwriting company. They're a startup by some Anthropic guys, and they've created what they call a SOC 2 standard for agents, which is basically, what's the checklist? Like, what are the things that I should be asking? It's, it's got a lot of security leaders who are like supporting something like that will emerge. But I think the pressure is going to come from the acquirers and the large vendors who start pushing down, prove to us, these check boxes. It's just we haven't been asked. So I would look at, if you want to get a sense, look at AIUC-1, and they've done a pretty good job of mapping EU AI Act and NIST ARMF, and there's the 800-53 private computer but then mapping them all together into controls, and it can give you a sense of that will be a good.
So there's a
resource.
baseline being established.
I mean, but it's just Wild West still.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just people are trying to come
Yeah,
out
we're
with meeting
wondering,
standards.
is there going to be an international standard or just a U.S. standard or all the above, and tie industries into it? I have a hunch we'll end up in the same compliance web we have today.
Yeah, well, if the government does it.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if they do it anymore.
In addition to that, I expect there will always be questions that are meaningless because that doesn't apply to my business. The checklist is, I have to ask all these questions.
Yep.
So you kind of have to be ready to answer them why you don't want, why that doesn't matter.
Yep.
And so that's the whole process of, it's like dating. You got to know each other.
I would suspect you're right on. There'll be certain industries where it's not going to be as important, and then you'll have your I'll call it the high tech where it's going to matter a lot.
Yes.
The more sensitive the data, the greater the compliance.
Yeah.
We're already seeing the EU has passed the AI Act. We have a couple of states who have passed AI regulations that are very specific to how the AI is being used, what kind of data is being processed. Those are not that difficult to comply with for those companies in those fields because they're already used to a very high level of compliance to begin with, very high level of protection of privacy, very high level protection of very high requirement for accuracy. So right now, we're not seeing a whole lot of, not seeing as many AI laws as we're seeing with privacy,
right,
which in the U.S. right now is a little bit of a mess with a lot of different state laws. And we have some discussion as to what AI laws should look like in the future. But in terms of compliance, depending upon what the company does, if they're already in a highly regulated area, that's going to be a large part of the due diligence. If they're not in a highly regulated area, there'll be some compliance issues, but nothing that will be as detailed.
Exactly.
I think it'd be a good time for audience questions. Are there any questions?
I probably don't need a microphone. So, curious, what came to my mind? When buyers and banks are looking at financing a deal, is there really a ranking of valuation books to an AI strategy or lack thereof? To that point?
And when I, at least I'm
How do you switch here buying stocks?
yeah. I don't buy it. My own stuff. I build them and then I don't know what happens. No, I think that at least when it comes if you're a startup at a certain, then it's all about growth, right? So it's more growth rate than it is even EBITDA. Once you get to a certain size and you're maybe more in private equity land, then it is how do we EBITDA optimize everything? So I think it's what size stage of the company, who's the buyer, what are the expectations? So I think that all matters. I don't think that anyone's showing up yet and being I don't think anyone's going to be what's your AI strategy? And that tells me, although it seems like the public markets are kind of demanding that the publicly traded companies have some type of AI strategy, whatever that means. So you have a lot of we're AI, but I don't know that still everyone's figured out how to make that.
Is that strategy being regulated? In other words, are they meeting this many boxes to check, or is it just, hey, what do you got? Oh, that sounds good.
No, I think that execs are under pressure to do AI things that we heard earlier, and just it's from small to large companies, everyone's under pressure to do that. And probably someone's walking to a room and being like, AI this year, everyone mic drop and walks out and was like, what does that mean? It's like, and it's like, well, we put it on the website because we're doing AI now. So I think what I'm seeing, at least in the large enterprises, you have like pockets of champions, I guess, who are just like, yeah, let's buy 20,000 licenses of Claude and give it to people. And others who are like, I run the division that's not going to do that. But like, so I think some are very forward leaning, like some of the larger banks. Others are, still trying to figure out where the budget comes from. Is it in all the different divisions? Do we have essentially centralize it? So like, I think there's like fits and starts happening. What I do think is happening regardless is probably shadow AI and shadow agents. And, that's, I think, the real challenge here is that like, we've got a technology, like, it's like adopting the internet. It's like in those days, like if you adopt the internet, like it wasn't fast for everyone to adopt, right? Like this is something that everyone has instant access to on their phones, right? I can take a picture of my screen, have ChatGPT. Like this is what the North Koreans are doing, right? They're like holding down full-time jobs by using Claude, right? They're not even speaking English and holding down full-time remote IT jobs by just taking tickets and putting into Claude and writing tickets back, right? So, the capability is out there, and I think that companies need to go into this thinking like, what is the happy path here? Like, I have to assume that this stuff is turned on. The risk is there already, right? Like, there's very little. And so, I guess when it comes to AI strategy, this is all to say that probably every company is already an AI company, right? Yeah. And then it's just a question of how do I mitigate the risk because it's in here somehow, right? Like, and at the same time, a lot of organizations are saying like I was saying earlier, like, I had someone, CEOs are getting on the screen on the team meetings and saying, if you're not using AI, whatever that means, your job is at risk, right? So everyone is now like, I didn't start using AI in organizations where that's happening. And that just sort of creates a little bit more extra, likelihood of your attack area, because even the people who are like, I'm never going to touch this thing now are like, well, your job's at risk. So, so, everyone's got to start using it and then you're going to have risk.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to give you a little bit more color on that, I have a couple clients in health tech, again, highly regulated. The data is very sensitive. And in two of those cases, they have strategic investors who they work very closely with, who are very concerned about compliance because it's health, and because it's highly regulated, and especially the one that's working on a multinational basis, because they're dealing with several different regimes of compliance that they have to follow. So as they bring AI on, they have to make sure that everybody in the company, one company is I think about 10 people, I think it's about 35 is the last head count, knows the drill. They know what they can do, they know what they can't do, they know where it can be used, where it can't be used. And as they are building AI and adding an AI product on top of their existing products, in each case, they're being very careful to use human in the loop, make sure that the AI itself is not making any decisions, because that would kind of blow them out of the water. But still using all the great things that AI can do to gather, synthesize, analyze knowledge, data, and use agents to go out and especially in healthcare. Well, we got this piece of data over here and this piece of data over here, and this doc, that doctor, this surgical center, gather all the data. And agents can do that very effectively, but still not have the AI make anything that looks like a decision. Make sure that the human's in the loop in terms of making decisions, and it's still fresh, if you will. It's still people. When people know they're on the cutting edge, they and it's important to them, then they're more careful. But then you also run into the issue, as you know, that if you're not being careful or you're not inculcating that into the company, that increases your risk of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that's the way a lot of organizations are trying to grapple with it. It's like, okay, human in the loop for everything. But then it's like, well, everyone's like, well, what's the value here, right? Like, if I, like, why do I, the beauty of a Waymo is that it drives for me. Otherwise, you're just giving me a GPS. Like, if I have to drive the car, why am I getting a Waymo, right? Like, so if the human's in the loop in every step, it's a good, like, security measure, but you're not getting the true speed and benefits that you can get from agents. You want to make them just like, you wouldn't want to maybe make a life or death decision, but what does Claude Code do all day, right? It makes decisions, right? It's deciding I'm going to pick this path and that path and this thing and that thing. And the challenge that we have that I see happening, and I worked on this on the OWASP agentic AI, like, top 10, is that you have this issue of, like, consent fatigue, right? Where, if anyone has used Claude Code here, I'm curious, like, how many people have used Claude Code? Like, okay, good. Yes, you guys are. So, two prompts in, you're like, two, and it's like, do you want to run bash whatever over? You're like, what the fuck do I know? Okay, yes, like, right. Like, so you have this issue of consent fatigue, right? And in the speed and scale at which these agents are going to produce useful behavior, it's basically I Love Lucy with the chocolates, right? And so we have this concept of, like, human on the loop. Like, we talked about this earlier, like, there's gonna be this new abstraction layer, right? Like, where no one writes code anymore, right? Like, no one looks at code anymore. Just like we were talking, like, no, when's the last time you looked at the, network traffic coming in out of your firewall, like, to check that every single, bit was blocked in the way that you just, like, port 80 check, like, you assume that it's working because we've abstracted that out and we trust the software. And I think, like, what's hard about this is we've got this non-deterministic element, which is a beautiful thing. Like, why do we want a Waymo? Because if there's traffic here, it can go there, right? That's what we want. But the question is, and we call this, like, principle of least autonomy, like, how do you restrict the agent's autonomy so that you leave it non-deterministic, but bound it? And by the way, this is what we do for humans, right? We're all non-deterministic. We bound ourselves with security. Like, we had the question before about, like, how do we handle, like, security awareness training doesn't work, right? Like, it doesn't work, right? Like, someone's going to click the link. So what do? We have EDR. We hate, why do we lock the doors? I can just put a post-it note, be like, you're not allowed in here, right? We assume that the instructions will be ignored, right? And we have behavioral controls. And this is the same approach that we take to agents, which is, you assume that they're prompt injected. You assume that even, they're thinking they're doing the right thing. Like, that's a lot of the challenges that we're seeing now, is that the agent just brute forces the action space to I think of, like, Jurassic Park, like, life finds a way. The agent will find a way, right, to do the thing that you asked it to do. Sometimes we talked about it earlier by, like, gaslighting you into doing the thing. This is a real example that I thought was hypothetical until I heard it from a CISO of, like, I talked about this earlier with you. Like, it's always the marketing team. They turned on Claude Code for the marketing team, and the security team got an alert of, like, remote code execution on, like, some marketing workstation, and they showed up and they were like, what's going on here? And he was like, yeah, I'm just doing my work. And they were like, well, you're like, using malicious code on he's like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm just doing what Claude Code told me to do. He, like, put Claude Code on some task and it couldn't access, like, a thing. And then he started, like, gaslighting his team. He was like, copy and paste this into here, copy and paste that into there to, to hack the thing. And it's not trying to be evil. It's trying to be helpful. And, I'm so on a rant here, but, like, the mythos thing, right? Like, the thing to take away from the mythos thing is that we already have, like, NSA grade level hackers in the coding agents, like Opus 4.5, like, they can hack anything and you're already giving them access to things, right? So forget about the people outside. It's like, we're using these tools that, like, can make biological weapons. And I'm not trying to make it scary. Like, I believe in this technology, but, like, it's here and we can control it. But, like, I just think we need to think about it a little bit differently. And it's a challenge, like, because you're right that without, human in the loop is the best we got in some cases right now. It's just that we're not going to get the real benefits that we want. Sorry, I want to there, but, like,
I want to make sure we get some other questions in. Go ahead.
Hey, so a couple of different points. Fred, you were talking about copyright, and I wanted to just ask a couple questions, clarifying questions on that, right? And I've certainly heard that anything that comes out of AI is not copyrightable. But as somebody who runs a dev shop, and you have people that are using AI integrally with their coding practices, is that becoming a gray area? I mean, if you've got somebody who's writing code and you type in something and it fills in the next 10 lines for you, where's that? Seems like a slippery slope.
It's tough. I mean, what happens is, of course, in the real world, there are bright lines. Somebody will write some code by hand. Some people will use AI to generate some code, and by the time they're done, it's hard for anybody who's done that to say, okay, this section of code was handwritten, this section of code was AI generated. This is actually, in many ways, an old problem, because even before AI, the question is, okay, well, I had some code that I found that was open source. I modified that. I've got some other code that I hand wrote and some stuff that I merged into these pieces. And trying to separate that out assumes that you can basically separate out the strands of spaghetti. And rarely, it's rare you can do that. Now, in some cases, if you have somebody who is that detailed, you can track and put bright lines around human created code versus AI generated code. If that's true and the code is mission critical, it's great. You file the application with Copyright Office. And by the way, folks, you can file any copyright application. You don't need to pay me or any other attorney, because the Copyright Office is one of the few user-friendly government agencies out there. But unlike patents and trademarks, which are user vicious. But you can file an application saying, this code that I've highlighted here is human created. It's original to me. It's non-trivial. Please give me a copyright application. We are not asking to protect third-party libraries, not trying to protect open source licensed or other third-party, which is a form of third-party code. We're not trying to protect anything that is over here, those portions that are AI generated. And I promise you, the Copyright Office will love you and give you a copyright registration. If you're not sure, that makes it a lot harder, because then you will either have to identify on the application what is and is not, or at least that there's some human created code, and disclaim protection of any AI generated code. The question that becomes, and it goes back to, again, Josh, I've been talking about this at some length. Do you want to protect the code? Is it worth following the application? If somebody copied that code, would you care? If somebody copied that code, would you at least want to be able to send a cease and desist letter to the bad guy? And then finally, of course, if the money's there and the time is there and the value is there, would it make sense to file an infringement lawsuit? So there's some issues there. But if you can't even identify what is human created, then at that point you're not going to be filing a copyright application.